All right, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Podcast on D Shot. Today's guest is former Whitewater men's basketball coach Pat Miller. Pat, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. How are you?
Good. How's retirement been for you?
Well, I'm not retired, as you know.
Yep.
I'm no longer coaching, so it's great. I have a new job working with Brand Tech out of Madison. Really unique company. They do a lot of different things. We have different quote unquote lanes, which are almost companies within the company. So I get to do a lot of different things. The people I work with are great, and it's a lot different than coaching. So it was a needed and a good change for me.
You're talking about brand tech. Obviously, one of the big things that you do with that is the Guarding with Cancer stuff. Talk about kind of how that kind of came about, and then kind of talk about, obviously it involves a lot of the high schools. What high schools did you guys do games with?
We had a lot of high schools. I think we had 19 high school games. We had four WISC games, and then Carroll and Carthage played a game. And basically, for people who don't know, Coaches versus Cancer has been a nationwide initiative amongst college basketball coaches to raise money for um, the American Cancer Society. And Greg Gard, I think it was 2016, I want to say, he established Guarding Against Cancer with his wife, Michelle. And basically, same type of thing, except all the money raised would stay in the state of Wisconsin. It directly supports Carbone Cancer Center in Madison, as well as families dealing with cancer and patient research, patient resources. So basically, just wanted the money to stay in Wisconsin, go directly to Carbone and UW Health. And he's done an amazing job. He's raised in excess of $7.5 million. And so basically, we had looked at Coaches versus Cancer. We're for a variety of reasons. It wasn't a great fit for what we wanted to do. So I reached out to Greg probably early last fall when I started working at Brand Tech and presented the idea to him, and he liked it. This was our kind of our pilot year, so it was good. I think it was successful for our first year. We learned a lot. We have a lot of new ideas. That's going to make it a lot better next year. And the schools, we had small schools, large schools, rural, urban, geographic diversity all over the state, and it was great. A lot of the schools got their students involved, communities involved. Obviously, cancer is something that impacts all of us in some way, shape, or form. So it was a great initiative and a good first year, and we're looking forward to next year.
How did kind of, obviously with the Garden for Cancer thing, how much did kind of that matchup that you guys had in the exhibition a couple years ago kind of get you involved in that?
Well, that was a key because for people who don't know, the Badgers play an exhibition against a WIAC team every year, and that game is deemed their Guarding Against Cancer game. So prior to the game, Greg and his wife Michelle come down. We met with different constituencies in the area, and then they host an event, either on the campus of the WIAC school or in the community. We chose a venue in Janesville. One of my friends has a great restaurant down there, Janisa. So we had our event at Janisa. Money raised went to Walworth County Cancer Coalition. I believe Rock County and Jefferson County received money as well. And that's when I really met a lot of the people that work with GAC. Spent a decent amount of time with Greg and his wife, Michelle. And as you know, a lot of people, a lot of high level people like Greg, they attach themselves to different charities, and their level of involvement is probably negotiable at times. And what I really saw from them is just how committed they were to this, how deeply personal it was, how much time they spent, whether it was the meetings leading up to the event, the night of the event. And it was just something I really enjoyed being part of. His team from UW Foundation, our awesome Heather Garrison and her people. So I just really enjoyed the experience. So it was a natural thing for me to try to reach out to them. And at Brand Tech, we want to do something as a company to show, we're involved in the community and we're doing something other than just our various lines of business. So it was a really great fit, and the companies proud of what we're doing, and hopefully we raise, we don't know the final numbers yet from this year, but hopefully we raise a lot of money this year, and we have big expectations for next year.
What made you kind of decide to only do it with basketball games? Because I know I was kind of suggesting, if you guys ever wanted to do any, well, obviously, Kakana softball is kind of a big power over here. I don't know if you're aware that they have an 81 game win streak.
I was not aware of that, but with Greg being the men's basketball coach at UW, obviously, we don't want to infringe on other people's areas. There's for example, when women's basketball, a lot of the women's teams have an initiative called Play for K,
Yep.
which is in honor of a former women's basketball coach. So we decided we were going to be with basketball. Yeah, I think in the future, is there a chance we would expand it? I think that certainly could be in the books, but right now we want to focus on basketball. We had a number of double headers this year. We would like to extend it to even more girls games next year, and just take advantage of the different communities that have done a great job, and be able to include boys and girls teams. I think would be a positive for everybody.
Yeah, I hope you can get maybe Kimberly or Kakana involved at some point. Obviously, your boy Shallow coaches at Kakana. I don't know how much you've gotten to talk to John Murphy, or how much you got to know him in his coaching career.
Well, those guys are legends, and obviously those are the communities and the people we want to continue to target, because they're successful. They're mainstays in their communities. They have a lot of connections, and those are the people that can run these events smoothly and do a great job and raise money for a great cause. So certainly those are the type of programs and coaches that we would love to have part of this.
Okay. Shifting to your coaching career, I'm gonna hit on Dave Augie Vandermeulen quick. So, like, what was he like as a Whitewater basketball coach, and then what did you learn most from him from being an assistant?
He was great. Every coach has their own style. He was very direct. There was no beating around the bush for anything. There was no kumbaya meetings or you know massaging of egos or anything like that. It was, he ran it very much like I would say probably like an NBA coach, very businesslike, very matter of fact. In fact, when I went to Platteville out of high school, played for Bow for a semester, just didn't like school there, went to Madison the second semester and considered walking on there, or trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I would play with a bunch of Whitewater alums at the Shell, and they encouraged me to go back to Whitewater. And I went down, and during my recruiting visit, Coach Vandermillen wasn't even around in the afternoon. I remember Coach Weaver took me to his house, and he was cutting his grass, and he basically said, "This is who we have." Named a couple players I think you can play here, and he said, "Just remember, you only have one opportunity to play college basketball." So there was no promises of playing time, or we need you to be here. And I really like that approach. It resonated well with me. It's very much like I am, very direct, straightforward. Um, so I think I always hit it off well with him. I enjoyed playing for him because I enjoyed that approach, that business like mentality. And obviously it's something that rubbed off on me. Playing for him was great. Working as an assistant was great. I'm thankful for how much time and effort he put into preparing me to be a head coach, not just the basketball aspect of it, but also, developing the booster club and being involved in the community and getting to know everybody in the community. He made that transition for me about as easy as it could possibly be. So, I'm always appreciative to him, and all the time he took to develop me as a coach and someone that could run a program like Whitewater.
Talk about that 1989 team. When did you know that team was going to make a run, and then what did it mean to kind of to cut down a net or win a championship as a player?
Well, I don't think any of us thought we were going to make a run. We had lost significant players from the year before. I think we were picked maybe sixth or seventh in the league. And that year we didn't have a lot of depth, but we had the right pieces. We had a great point guard who could distribute. We had two good shooters on the wings that could stretch the floor. We had a good 6'9" center who could rebound and did a great job playing his role. He didn't need the ball. And then we had Albert Gordon, who was probably as dynamic a player as the WIC has ever seen. 6'5", incredibly athletic, amazing vertical. Ended up playing for the Globetrotters for quite a while afterwards. So we had the right combination of players, and we had some good critical pieces that came off the bench that were solid, strong, good players. So it was more a matter of we just had great chemistry with that team, and as the year went on, we just continued to build off of that and made a great run in the tournament. And it's a pretty amazing feeling as a player to get through the tournament. There's no more games to be able to cut down the nets. It's a great feeling of satisfaction, and it's a bonding experience with your teammates. We played some great teams in the final. I think Trenton State had 6 or 7 Division I transfers. They had Greg Grant, who at that time was a leading scorer in Division III history, who ended up playing in the NBA for a number of years. So they were a loaded, talented team, and it was a great win for us. And obviously, something as a player, something I'll always cherish and remember fondly.
How did that kind of team compare to obviously the ones that you won national championships as a coach?
Oh, things have changed over time. I remember talking to Augie and Jack Bennett and some of those people that coached in the league, prior to this latest, 2024, since 2020 maybe. And it's just different. Like back in the 70s was probably the heyday of the WIC in terms of elite talent, guys who were going to the NBA, the Tony Carrs and people like that were just phenomenal players. But over time, there's just a lot more scholarship opportunities. A lot of NAI schools have gone Division I. A lot of Division II schools have moved to Division I. They've increased scholarships. So I think the WIC is still great. There's still great players. If you can win that conference, you can obviously win a national championship. But the level of players are not the same as they were back in the 70s, 80s, even 90s. I think, for no fault of the league, I just think, like I said, with the increased number of scholarships, it's just different. Players that, Albert Gordon, there is no chance he ends up at Whitewater in this day and age. He's a mid to high major player, and he would have ended up at that level.
Okay. Um, Shifting to a little bit with kind of obviously last night with Alabama winning. What was it like to have Nate Oates as an assistant? And then the other part of it is what was TJ Otzelberger like as a player?
Well, it was fun. Last night was obviously a fun night for me watching those guys. I love both of them. They're both great coaches. Extremely proud of them for what they've accomplished. And Nate was great. True Nate Oates story. He was my grad assistant, and we're getting ready to go to Stevens Point to play point in the conference tournament. And I think it was probably my first year as a head coach. And I'm running around with like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to get everybody organized on the bus on time. And we're probably an hour into the drive, and I realized I did not bring my suit or my shoes or any of my dress clothes. And Nate said, "Well, I actually brought 2 suits and 2 pairs of shoes for some reason." I said, "Why did you bring that?" And he's like, "I don't know. I just packed extra stuff." And amazingly, we wear the same size suit, same size shoes. So he bailed me out there. But he was just a guy that he's very smart. He's a math guy, very analytical. He's really used analytics in his approach at Alabama on how he evaluates things, the decisions he makes, the type of shots that they take. Very much has an analytical background to it. And he's done great. Like he understands he needs great players. He's recruited well. I think if you watch both TJ and Nate, their teams play with a great freedom, and they play fast at times. They're very disciplined though. They make good decisions. They put a lot of pressure on teams. So it's been fun to watch. TJ as a player is much like he was as a coach. He's a grinder, exceptional work ethic, very engaged, very a high level of attention to detail, and that's reflected in their teams. And TJ's you watch his demeanor on the sideline. He has great composure, um, great focus, and his teams reflect that. Iowa State certainly is not an easy job, and he's done an amazing job getting players there. He's put them in the top 10 in the country. He's been to two Sweet 16s in the last 3 years, which is a great accomplishment. So, I'm really happy for those guys. I'm proud of them, and it's great to see them having the level of success that they are.
I gotta give a shout out quick too, because TJ has a Kimberly grad and Jackson Pavletsky, so gotta
Yep.
give
Yeah.
that kid a shout out.
Yep.
Um, the Inside Wisconsin podcast. I know Johnny Anderson brought up Oshkosh, but what I want to know is what the only team that you had a losing record against in the WIAC was Stevens Point. So what gave your team so much trouble against Stevens Point? Was it like obviously just going up against see they had the Jason Kelso, Nick Bennett years, you had in Tyler Tillema. What made them such a hard team to kind of get wins against?
They were really good. And you look at the era I coached, we won a couple national championships at Whitewater. Stevens Point won a number of national championships. Platteville's national championships were during the Bow era in the early 90s. And it was, more a function of Stevens Point was just really good, really well coached with Jack Bennett and Semling and really good players and great tradition. And those were some of the most enjoyable games in my whole coaching career. We had a great rivalry with Stevens Point, very intense, good games, very clean games, well played games, not chippy or anything like that. And just, as back in the day, you'd go into Stevens Point, the crowds were amazing. It was a really tough atmosphere to play in. So it was just a combination of them being really good and just a really tough team to play.
Okay. Yeah, I went to a Stevens Point game this year to catch Seth Meyer and play and Jake Buchanan are from Kimberly and play there. They were playing Logan Jabwani from Kakana and River Falls, and it was a cool environment, especially with kind of the baseline thing that they have like the alumni or the donors that sit in right behind one of the baseline sides of the court. That's a cool environment. I'm gonna throw a trivia question as long as we're talking national championships. So the unique thing, coach, is 9 out of the last 10 years on the women's side in Division Three, the national champion has been undefeated, with the lone exception being Hope's win over Whitewater on the women's side a couple years ago. Can you name the last men's undefeated national champion in Division Three?
It's probably Platteville, wasn't it?
Yes,
Yeah,
it was 26 years ago.
yeah. It's tough. I mean, it's tough to go through a season undefeated, even if you're great with the travel and maintaining expectations and players not getting too full of themselves. That's a hard task. So that's not a surprising statistic to me.
Okay. What's changed about most about coaching from year one that you were at Whitewater to your last year, and like what's changed with like recruiting and those things?
Well, I think the process has changed a lot. When I first started out, it was very much a process where you'd go, find out if a potential player was interested, and you'd spend a lot of time with this high school coach, go meet at the school, meet with the parents, and they would come and visit campus, and that was kind of the process. And as the emergence of AAU, then it became a much different process, almost to the by the time I was finishing, the high school coaches, a lot of them didn't have a lot of involvement in the recruiting process. I don't know if they particularly wanted to. The process became much different. I think you know players chose schools for different reasons. There's much more, I think, street cred associated with some type of scholarship, and I firmly believe a lot of student athletes make bad decisions. They go to schools they would never go to in a million years if they weren't getting money, and they end up becoming transient, moving from one school to the other. You see that now in Division One. I think one of the things that's really changed in the transfer portal is it used to be more of a Connor Essegian situation where he's not really playing. They're bringing in another guard. It doesn't look like he's going to play. So he's looking for a different opportunity. Now you have players that are on really good teams, NCAA tournament teams. They were starters, they were leading scorers, and now they're in the transfer portal because now they're trying to monetize the success they had at whatever school they're at, and now they're going out and looking for more money, and they're going to get it. Obviously, you look at Dickinson going from Michigan to Kansas, those type of situations. So the whole landscape of college athletics has changed considerably. NIL and the transfer portal, I think one of the big changes, even at Whitewater, Derek Gray, before his tragic passing, he was going to play one more year at Whitewater and then he was going to leave after what would have been his sophomore year. Miles Barnstable, another great player, is in the transfer portal and most likely will leave and has all kinds of opportunities. A lot of Division II, number of good Division I opportunities. So even now, it's hard to build a program and as you did in the old days, where you bring in players and develop them over 4 years. It changes what you can do. You can't run as complex systems. It's almost like starting over every year with new guys. Peterson Pearson, excuse me, as you know, is in the transfer portal after being National Player of the Year at Platteville. So it's a different landscape. I think for coaches who are program builders, it's difficult because it takes time to develop people, and it takes time to develop chemistry. It takes time to develop systems, and that's a luxury that I think is becoming more and more less common with the new environment of college athletics.
What was your assessment? Obviously, 1 year being, or obviously without being on the court this year of Whitewater's men's team. And then obviously on the other part of that, do you think I think Jared's going to get the job unless Whitewater gets somebody that just has this resume that's just way too impressive or something. But what was your assessment of Whitewater's team this year? How different was it to not be on the court coaching? And then what was your assessment of Jared?
Well, it's hard. Obviously, I'm not at a single practice. I don't really know what they're trying to do or what they're trying to run. So that's one thing as being in coaching I understand is that people that go to these games and have a million different opinions, in reality you have no idea what's going on. You don't know what adjustments they're trying to do, what schemes they're trying to run. You don't know who's running plays incorrectly or not in the right spots. So I think overall it was a hard situation. I The job is probably somewhat contingent on how you're doing. So I thought he handled it well, especially really high expectations coming off the Final Four year, and which was really a pretty incredible run and a very emotional run. I knew it was going to be difficult for them to follow that up with the same level of intensity. But and as far as who gets a job, I have no idea. I have no idea who applied. Um, I think I'm sure they'll have some good applicants and they'll go through the process and figure it out. So, it was different, obviously, but it was enjoyable. It was fun just to sit back and watch games. I didn't go to many games. I didn't want to be in the way or be of interference, but I watched them all at home and enjoyed watching them and rooting for them. And it's fun just being a casual fan, whether it's Marquette, Wisconsin, the Bucks, watching Whitewater. It's different. I can go to the high school games I want to. If I want to leave after, midway through the second half, if it's a bad game, I can. I don't have to stick around. I don't have to talk to parents. I don't have to evaluate players. So for me, it's just been fun to enjoy basketball from a fan perspective as opposed to it being a job every night.
What were you saying before it somehow kind of butted out?
About what? I said a lot of things there.
I don't remember. Um, anyways, what was your? Obviously, there was a lot of coaching turnover with the WIC this year. With obviously Jared being the interim, Dernbach went back to Stevens Point. JT is now the head coach at Lacrosse. What was your thoughts about kind of that turnover? in the league this year? And then obviously, what are your thoughts on obviously JT taking over as a head coach after being at Bryan and Stratton?
Well, I think he did a great job, and he's another Whitewater guy. He worked on our staff at Whitewater, so I have a lot of familiarity with him, and very happy for him. He did a good job at the junior college level, and took over a good lacrosse program, and he'll be successful. It's fun to see the turnover. It's fun to watch, how guys are going to approach their job. It's fun to watch the type of stuff they run. So I enjoy it. Like I said, I can watch it more as a fan. It's a lot different watching games, scouting them, really studying it as opposed to just, flipping on the feed and watching play. I watched all of Platteville's tournament games. I enjoy doing that because it's, like I said, it's entertainment now. I'm not watching it to break them down or prepare for them or study them. So it's just a different level. But the league has always been good. It's always been well coached. There's a lot of really good coaches in the league again right now, and it's always fun to see where players end up and watching the competitive elements of the league and who can maneuver that and navigate it and come out on top.
I think when it budded out, you were talking about kind of maybe you were talking about Whitewater's team.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's just it was a tough year to follow up. Um, everybody's gunning for you. You have a big target on your back, and it's a lot of pressure. And I thought at times they played pretty well. I thought they struggled a little bit with consistency, especially defensively. And it just like I said, it's a tough situation being an interim. Um, Especially Whitewater had what, two coaches and 46 years, so almost 5 decades of having two people. So that's a pretty significant change. And I thought they all navigated it well and did the best they could. I'm sure they're all disappointed. Like I said, there was high expectations, but they won a lot of games and played well at times. They just didn't fully put it together and reach the level they had in the past. But like I said, that was a tough ask.
Favorite high school coaches that you've met in your career. If I had to say, like, obviously there's good coaches and that I deal with. Obviously, Corey Hayes is good. Jake Fenroy does a good job at Little Shoot. Murphy's obviously a legend. One of my favorites is on the girls' side with Dave Lepisto, good X's and O's coach, but also creates a lot of highlight videos so that of his players so that if they want to go play at the next level that they have stuff to sign out. Who are those high school coaches that you've liked in getting to know in your career?
There's so many, just too many to name. Back in the day, all the Jim Gazes of the world, and all the city coaches that were amazing, and back in the '90s, the amazing city conference rivalry games. You'd have Diener and Gaz, Vincent and King, and again, I don't even want to name names because there's so many guys. And even back to when I played, legends like Pete Olson at Madison La Follette and Bernie Barkin at Beloit, coaches where I grew up and played against some of them. But one of the great things about Wisconsin, and I think in part why the WIC has always been so good in Division III basketball in general, is Wisconsin is a really well coached state. Jerry Pettigrew has done a good job with the Wisconsin Basketball Coaches Association. They do a lot of developmental clinics. Um, you know, we have very good educational system, very good public schools, and I think that's reflected in the overall level of basketball. And I mean, there's a long list of really good, successful coaches, and that's been one of the fun things with Guarding Against Cancer is I've seen programs and schools and communities I had never gone to before because we didn't have a recruiting interest. So I've got to see some different coaches, and they're good. I mean, there's a lot of great coaches. I went and watched Marathon, and they were excellent, really well coached. So it was fun. Like I said, a lot of great coaches in Wisconsin. Way too many to name.
How much did you watch the state tournament this year, and did you get around to watching the Nina game that went 4 overtimes?
I did not get to see I watched a lot of the state tournament. I did not get to see the Nina game. I was out. that night out and about and did not have access to a TV, but I was getting reports on my phone. The state tournament was good. I'll be honest, I miss the old days of, I thought the greatest day was Thursday when you'd have the Division I quarterfinals in the afternoon and Thursday night. I don't love the new format of the state tournament. Shouldn't even say new. It's not that new anymore. But I liked it better when there were, the four, like I said, the four Division I games. I thought those were good games. So I think it's good. I think the attendance is probably down. You probably know better than I do, but just kind of from my observations, it's not what it was back in the day. But still good, still entertaining. A lot of really good players. So always a fun week.
Yeah, and St. Joe's losing in a heartbreaker. That was a tough thing as a Kenosha kid to see, but that was neat
Well,
to
there
see
there were
them go
good
back to
games.
back.
Right,
Yeah.
and there were good games. You have a four overtime game. Mineral Point was in some battles and tough games. The way Wisconsin Lutheran won on kind of a broken play where they got the basket. So really good, entertaining games, fun games to watch. And I think that's why everybody loves it. Even the NCAA tournament. Like obviously, there's been great games and games going down to the wire, and it's really a fun time of year. If you love basketball, this is the best 2 or 3 weeks you can get.
Who do you got in your I guess in your bracket?
No, I went on a limb and took UConn. I just think they're better than everybody else. I think Arizona getting beat last night hurt me a little bit. I thought they'd go a little bit further, um, and I hate to admit it, but I did think North Carolina would beat Alabama. I think both Arizona and North Carolina, their two best players were no shows from three. I think one was 0 for 9 for three, and one was 0 for 8. And when you get to that level, that's hard to overcome.
I kind of selfishly picked teams or whatever. I picked Alabama to win it just because of Nate.
Well, and you might be right. You might be right. I'm pretty conservative. I think teams are favorites and seeded the way they are for a reason, and you're obviously going to have upsets. But I think UConn they have great players and they run great stuff. Some teams they run great stuff and they just don't have the higher level players. Some teams have really good players and they don't run great stuff, and that catches up to them. But I think there's a few programs out there where the talent level is exceptional, and I really love watching UConn play. They run so many great sets and different things offensively. I just think they're really good.
What does it say about the Whitewater Oshkosh rivalry? To have obviously, what does that rivalry say about recruiting? Like, not so much battles, I would say, but like obviously Oshkosh has the one of the best conference high school sports conferences in its backyard in the FVA. Obviously Whitewater has, you can go recruit in Madison, Janesville, Milwaukee areas. What is kind of that rivalry say about those kind of recruiting areas in the basketball talent?
Well, again, I think it reflects what I talked about earlier is how good the overall basketball talent is in the state of Wisconsin. I mean, there's what is there 13 national championships. Whitewater has four, Platteville has four, Stevens Point has four, Oshkosh has one.
Yep.
That's an exceptional number of national champions coming out of one conference. It's unprecedented in Division III. No one is even remotely close. The year we won the national championship, I think in 2012, no, 2014, I think we didn't even win the conference. I think Point won the national championship a year. They didn't win the conference, so it's Platteville obviously could have had a great run this year. It was disappointing how they lost their game. I think if they win that game, they have a great chance of winning the national championship. So those are all critical battles. Keeping those kids, that are close, getting them to your school. But we have a great at Whitewater. We had a great rivalry with Platteville. We had a great rivalry with Point. We had a great rivalry with Oshkosh. Just a lot of good players, good teams, really well coached. And the key to coaching obviously is having good players. I used to always tell my coaching classes, if you think you're the reason as a coach that your team is winning, then you probably have one foot in the coaching grave because you're not. If you don't have high level players, one of my former high school coaches, he told me if you don't have good players, the best case scenario is you have a bad team that's organized. And I think there's probably some truth to that. So, having great players is critical, and then you have to manage them and put them in the right spots. Then you're more of a facilitator than anything else. But you look at guys like, you know, you look at people who have what's his face at for the Spurs. Who's what's the Spurs coach? It's slipping my mind.
Popovich.
Popovich. So you look at the level of success he had and how bad they are now.
Yeah.
Obviously he didn't forget how to coach. The players aren't the same. The roster's not the same. So you're contingent on your players. So to your point, all those recruiting battles are critical, because if you lose those, that's your first step in losing games.
Okay. Before I ask you about the 2014 national championship 10-year anniversary, I want to throw three kind of roster type questions at you. So the first one is, who would be on your all time Whitewater men's basketball roster of guys that you coached as either as a head coach or an assistant coach?
Again, there's so many guys, and there's different eras. A lot of guys that were all Americans. James Stewart was an unbelievable player. Um, Cordell Young, Chris Davis. Just again, there's so many guys. I don't even like to start naming names, which I just obviously did, because then you leave people out and people get their feelings hurt. But we've had a lot of great players, and I'll be honest with you, some of the lower profile guys were exceptionally valuable too, because they played their role to a T. I think a player like Eric Bryson or Alex Merg, you probably wouldn't put them in a category of the best players to ever play, but man, they were great defenders. A guy like Eric Bryson, he could guard literally 1 through 4, maybe even 5. He played his role. They made big plays. They were great teammates. So, the Chris Davises of the world aren't the same without those guys around them. And that's why those became great teams, because you had the elite talent that was unselfish and played within our system. And then you had the quote unquote role players who were outstanding players that did their job at an extraordinarily high level. And that's why those teams were good. So we've had a lot of good players in a lot of various roles, and they're all equally important.
I know Matt Lewis said at one point to me that Alex Merck was probably one of the best defensive players that he ever coached against.
For sure he was. He was relentless on the ball. And if you remember back then, we also had Patrick Suter,
Yep.
who was also a relentless defensive player. So we would rotate those two people on the point guard, and it was a long, long day for those guys. They had to fight to get the ball just up. And, you know, Suter was so quick and so active with his hands, and he played so hard. That was a challenge. And Merg and Bryson both had a great ability of fouling people continuously without getting called. They did a great job of always playing on that edge of physicality, where they stayed legal for the most part, but were able to really beat people up, make it tough for them. So, yeah, I agree with him 100%. Merg was an exceptional defender.
Okay, so the other one relating to Whitewater, and I think about this a little bit when it comes to your teams. Do you ever kind of think about like it? It's probably like another one of those where you don't want to name people, but like the guys that maybe they had maybe they had one good year at Whitewater, maybe two, or maybe they had an injury, or maybe there was other things that happened. Do you ever kind of look back at those type of players? Because I would be like, obviously Darnell would be probably the headliner on there. Or I think of Zach Knobloch being a 3-point shooter that you had for like 1 year.
Well, I think that's part of what we talked about earlier. For Darnell Harris, he was great at Whitewater. He had a good year for us, and I think it was good for everyone. It was good for him. I think we had a little more structure in terms of our program and our weightlifting than he had prior to that. And then he went on and played great and played in an NCAA tournament and was able to play professionally. And he was a great kid. And I for one would never want to restrict other people's opportunities. And every situation's different. I think with Knobloch, he was a great shooter, and he started the year on fire. And then I think what happened to him a little bit is people figured out he was a shooter, didn't really put the ball on the floor very well, and that when you have players like that, they once people figure them out, they have limitations. And so, everybody has different reasons for transferring, moving on, moving up, moving over. And I've just always respected those decisions. And, I think it's important as a coach to focus on the people who want to be in your program, who put in the work. And I spent very little time worried about who didn't want to be there for whatever reasons. But like in a case like Darnell that you mentioned, I was always really happy for him. I really enjoyed coaching him, really liked him, and was just really happy to see him have the level of success, and that obviously elevated him to have the success at that level and play at that level, and certainly allowed him to make more money postgraduate.
Two other guys I would put on that would be maybe they got hit by an injury, Miles Chamberlain and Charlie Fisher.
Yeah, Miles he really battled injuries and had a lot of potential. Same with Charlie, another guy, great kid, great teammate, fun guy to be around, and just had a couple really significant knee injuries, and those are hard things to come back from. They're just, I've dealt with injuries myself, and the rehab process, the strengthening process, getting confidence back, getting your endurance back. They're difficult things to come back from. And it's interesting because that's why you have to recruit good rosters and deep rosters, because you just never know when those situations are going to happen. And someone you're counting on that you think is going to be a significant contributor, all of a sudden they have a significant injury and they become non-factors. So that's obviously one of the challenges of coaching.
One of the other ones I would randomly put on there that only lasted a year was the Ron Padden kid.
Yeah, again, really talented player. Um, he's a guy, I think if he would have been able to stick it out, it would have been a benefit for him. But and again, it's you know he was probably one of the more talented players I've ever coached in terms of size and skill and ability to do things. But every player is not a great fit in every program. I think we allowed our players a good amount of freedom, and I always felt like I was more of a player's coach, allowing players to be aggressive and do what they do well. But in part along with that, we had a lot of expectations. Defensively doing little things, and that's hard for certain players. I think even at the Division I level, you look at a player like AJ Storr, who obviously is a great athlete, does a lot of things well. He also does a lot of things not very well, and a lot of detailed things he's going to have to shore up and get better at. Personally, I think Wisconsin helped him with those things. I think they emphasize those things, and I don't know if moving ship is a great idea for his development. Probably will be financially, but everybody makes their decisions for one reason or another, and like I said, it's a transient world of college basketball right now.
Okay. Best players you coached against.
That I coached against?
Yeah.
Oh man, there's a lot of them. A lot of them. Dvorak. I still have nightmares about him at Oshkosh. He was really good. I mean, there's just so many. Platteville's had great players. Stevens Point had a long line of great players. Like you mentioned, Kelso, Bennett, during that whole era. Um, and that's what was fun about coaching. I have a friend who coached in the NBA and played golf with him, and he talks about game planning for Shaq and Jordan and all those guys back in the day. And obviously it's not Shaq and Jordan, but game planning against all the good players we played against. The Rich Melzers of the world at River Falls. That's a lot of fun. It's challenging. It's fun. It's fun when you have high level players and your opponents have high level players, because they become good strategic battles. So there was a lot, like we've talked about, a number of times already. Just the level of talent in the state that ends up in the WIC has been great.
Now on to the 2014 10-year anniversary thing. What do you remember most about that team? When did you know that you guys were gonna make a run?
Well, I felt we from the get go we had a chance to make a run. We had a lot of guys from the 2012 team. I felt like we had really good parts, and we had high expectations for that group. And Point was also very good that year. I think we finished second in the conference that year. Um, had a caught a break when Point got upset by Emory at Stevens Point. So much like 2 years ago when we made it to the Final Four, instead of playing Randolph Macon, the defending national champs at home to go to the Final Four, we ended up playing SUNY Oswego because they got beat the night before. Stevens Point got beat the night before, so we played UT Dallas the first game, and then we played uh, instead of playing Point at Point, we ended up playing Emory in advance to the Final Four. And then I believe our first matchup in 14 was Illinois Wesleyan, and KJ Evans had a great game. They played a zone, and he did a great job of getting inside the zone and picking it apart. And then we had the classic game with Williams with the Cordell Young play at the end of the game. So it was a team I felt was built to make a run. And but like I've said, you never know. You have to catch breaks along the way, and we certainly did with Point losing, and obviously allowed us to get to the Final Four where we took care of business.
What did it mean that year to cut down the nets at Stevens Point? Was that like a is that an interesting thing to look back on? It just is like kind of maybe it was a weird thing, I guess.
What's weird in those games is, and I remember Lawrence, I think they played Stevens Point out in Oregon or in Washington, and the host team got beat, and I think there was like 80 fans for a sectional final to go to the Final Four. And the game against SUNY Oswego, it's a neutral court game, not a lot of fans, and the game against Emory was the same way. It was a neutral court game, not a lot of fans. So that's what's surreal about it is you're playing at Point. It's a neutral court, not a lot of fans, as opposed to if you're playing the host team, then it's a lot different. I remember 2009 we played Elmhurst at Elmhurst in the first round, won in either overtime or double overtime, and it was just a completely insane atmosphere. It was loud. They were really good. We were really good. So it's just you just never know what you're going to get in the tournament, and that's the interesting thing about Division III is that you could get the home school or you get an upset, and now you have a neutral site game with no fans. So that was a surreal element of that one.
Keeping it on Stevens Point, I know that year you had the cervical spine surgery. Nick stepped in. You had the game where I went nuts on the UW TV broadcast, doing color, commentating. Talk about how big that year it was to kind of get that win over Stevens Point, when they're undefeated and ranked number one in the country, and how big of a win that was for that season.
Well, it's big because it's a confidence builder, and I think confidence is built through a lot of little successes, and those that like getting up, doing the right things every day. As a team, sometimes you win games you shouldn't win, and it propels you in a really good direction. Sometimes you lose games you shouldn't lose, and that can make you a worse team than you should probably be. So all those little victories or defeats impact your mentality, it impacts your chemistry, it impacts your trajectory as a team. And I thought that was a really important game for us to believe, to get the win against them. They were really good. Um, so it's a confidence builder, and obviously the more confident your teams are, the better they're going to play. So that was really a critical game. It was a great atmosphere. It was a great game. I was pretty much really out of it on drugs. I think that was maybe the day after my surgery. So I had a lot of different drugs. So I don't remember a lot of the specifics of the game, but I know we won and I know it was important.
What was your kind of assessment that year of Nick Bennett stepping in for you for 3 games? Do you think he gets back into coaching at some point? I know he could have ended up at Kimberly, which would have been a cool thing for me, but Murphy's still
Well,
a good guy, anyways.
yeah, I mean, Nick's a really good basketball mind. He was a great player. He's been around basketball sports his whole life. Obviously, his pedigree. He's learned from his dad, his uncle, his aunt, his cousin. A lot of great coaches in that family. So he's certainly a very capable person. It's just, what does he want to do with his life? I mean, if he wanted to coach, certainly he could do it. He could do it at a really high level, but it's everybody's different. Coaching's a grind, and some people embrace it and like it, and other people not so much. But from a capability perspective, certainly Nick's as capable as anybody.
The thing about that national championship game that year, Duncan Robinson was playing the opposing team. He's now in the NBA. How cool is it to look back at that national championship game and be able to say that you guys played against a future NBA player?
It's fun, it adds a little color, and it's been great to see him have the level of success that he's had. And in fact, Mike Maker, who coached Williams, is now an assistant at St. Thomas. He After Williams, he got it. He was in the Beeline tree, and a few years ago when we switched our system and went to the two guard, I actually met with Mike in lacrosse, and he was nice enough to sit down with me and give me a bunch of information and talk about their offense. After we played them, I really liked it. And once he had left, I said, "Hey, would you mind sharing this with me?" So it's just interesting how you have those games, you have that interaction, and then it turns into a friendship. And now he's at St. Thomas with Coach Tower, who obviously they were a Division III program. We had some battles with them, and they're doing great at the Division I level. One of my good friends' son plays up there, so it's just interesting. And the basketball world becomes pretty small, but that was a fun game, and fun to have Duncan Robinson involved in that game. Like I said, it's fun for our guys to talk about and our fans, and good to see him move on and have the amount of success he did at Michigan and in the NBA.
Let's talk about that final play of that national championship. Obviously, Cordell or the mayor tip in with 4.8, 4.9. You guys could have called timeout, but you didn't. I kind of looking back at it, agree with it because you want to put the defense, not have their defense get set. Just talk about that last play that Q made to secure that national championship.
Well, those plays, that's something obviously we had worked on. But people have to do the right thing. And again, like when I talked in my coaching classes, one of the comparison I would use is when the Packers lost the NFC Championship game to Seattle on the onside kick when the guy tried to field the ball that was supposed to block. So when you get those high pressure situations, everybody has to do their job. So in that situation, KJ Evans took the ball out. If somebody else grabs the ball in a panic, now it's disrupted everything. So KJ grabbed the ball. That was the first thing I watched. Second thing, he's got to throw it to the right person. And fortunately, he did. He threw it to Cordell. And I think a big part of that game, and one of the reasons you don't call timeout, is Cordell caught the ball moving up the floor. If we call timeout and we have to enter the ball against pressure, they're going to be able to make defensive substitution. They're going to be able to sit in the huddle and say, okay, if Cordell Young gets it, we're going to double team him and get the ball out of his hands. But they weren't able to do any of those things. So KJ made the right decision. He got the ball. He threw it to the right guy. And then the only other trepidation I had was as Cordell Young was getting to midcourt, it looked like there was a potential for him to get trapped. And if that happened, I probably would have had to call timeout. But once he navigated the trap, once he got to half court and got through that situation, I knew he was going to get to the basket. I just didn't know if he had enough time. That was the whole play was like slow motion to me. And then once he got to half court, that's when I felt some anxiety because I just didn't know if he had time to get there. And what did he make it by? About zero point 0.8 seconds?
I think it was point 0.9 on the clock.
Zero point 0.9. And he may have been one of the only, back to having good players. I don't know that there's many players in the country that could have done what he did on that play to have the athleticism, the speed, to navigate the defense, to finish. I think sometimes being a lefty is good, because it's people aren't used to it. So he was able to get to his left hand and finish and get fouled. So it was just, I think a combination of we made the right decision not calling timeout, and then we had a player and players that executed the play as we would hope they would, and we had a phenomenal athlete who could finish it.
Talk about the impact that AJ made on that team.
KJ?
AJ.
Oh, Bocchini, so people who don't know, AJ has cerebral palsy, and you know, his dad asked if we'd take him on as a manager, and we did. And he showed up every day. Did whatever we asked him to do. And then it became a situation where guys wanted them to travel, and they said, we'll take care of him, we'll help him out, and he just became a spiritual leader for us. Seeing him battle the disabilities he had, and seeing his level of enthusiasm, his passion for basketball, his passion for winning, he just became a very significant figure in our program that guys looked up to, they respected, they were motivated by him. And it's when you have those special seasons and special accomplishments, there's a lot of reasons for them, and there's great players, there's great motivation, and we certainly had good players. We had someone like AJ who was emotional leader for us, and without all those things working together and working well, you don't end up as a national champion. So certainly, everybody played different various roles, but his role was significant and very memorable. Again, in my coaching career, and that was certainly one of them, is getting to know him and seeing him navigate school, and being a manager and student assistant coach, and embracing every element of that was something pretty fantastic.
Talk about the tournament that KJ had that year.
He was great. Another guy, exceptional athlete, could score at all three levels, and just a fierce competitor. And, another guy I loved to coach. I loved his intensity, really developed as a player at Whitewater, got much better defensively, really got better technically. He was always a great athlete. He always had an ability to score, but he did a lot of the little things better. And he was the most valuable player in the Final Four, very well deserving, and just an exceptional talent. And again, a really, really fun guy to coach.
Six national championships that year, the unprecedented trifecta. Talk about kind of being able to be a part of that, the trifecta, and just the success the athletic department had that year.
It was good. I mean, it was obviously an amazing accomplishment that had never been done. Not sure how likely it is it'll happen again at any level anytime soon. But it was just, again, like I talked about, like within our team, you have great players. You have AJ Bocchini. You have that summit, that synergy that brings everything together. And I think our athletic department at that point was very much like that. We had great leadership in Paul Polinsky. We had great leadership campus wide in our chancellor's office. Lance Leipold, obviously incredibly successful, and he was a big driver. Lance was very much a grinder. He was always trying to get better, and his effort to make football better, that had an impact on the rest of the athletic department. He was fighting for resources that ended up helping and impacting all of us. And just the tone at the time, the culture of the program, is there was an expectation that we were going to win, and we were going to win national championships. And I think that belief system really had a huge impact on a lot of different sports. When you're working out every day and you're in the weight room with other programs that are contending for championships and winning championships, that becomes contagious, that becomes your culture. And it was really an amazing time. Vo obviously has had a tremendous amount of success in his program. Lance, what he's gone on to do, So again, there was just a great symmetry or synergy, a great combination of people that were motivated, that had commonality in what we were trying to accomplish, and it was a really cool and significant accomplishment. Really, really fun to be part of.
Talk about kind of how proud are you of Coach Leipold that he's been able to accomplish what he's been able to do at obviously Buffalo and at Kansas and at the Division 1
But
level.
but that's the key. It's at Buffalo and at Kansas. Those are two extraordinarily difficult Division 1 football jobs. So his level of success is it's amazing. He went to Buffalo. They were struggling. He built that, turned them into a contender in the MAC, got them into bowl games. Which was an amazing accomplishment. And then what he's done at Kansas might even be more impressive in that conference with the history that Kansas football has had, and now with Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC. I mean they're going to be right there in the top of the Big 12, and the sky's the limit for him. And it's just it just shows what he did at Whitewater was almost unparalleled. Pretty pretty incredible run that he had. Obviously, his record is mind blowing, but it was his intensity, his attention to detail, his work ethic, all those things, translated to Buffalo. They certainly have translated to Kansas, and he's getting exactly what he deserves. He's a committed person. Like I said, he works very hard. He's very focused, and I'm very happy for him and proud of him, and happy for his family. What he's done is pretty spectacular.
Last thing, Coach, before I let you go, best game that you ever coached in your coaching career.
That's a tough one. There's, obviously the Cabrini National Championship game was probably one of the most fun because we were down so far, came back to win. What was at stake there, a national championship. That was probably, that was amazing. The Cordell Young play in the Williams game, that was amazing because again, they were national championship games. Even the Nate Oates suit game that I referenced earlier, I think we were down 23 in that game at one point in the game, and we came back in the second half and won the game and advanced to go play Oshkosh in the conference tournament championship, and that's when we got beat on a last second shot by Dorak. So there's been a lot of pretty amazing games that I've been a part of, but I would say the two national championships, because of the drama and the stakes in those games, were the two most significant.
All right, Coach. Thanks for joining me. And good to see you again.
Yep, you too. Have a great weekend.
All right,
All right, see you later.
see ya.